Chapter 4 on machinery is very much an extension of Chapter 3, so if you have not read the chapter or listened to our summary and discussion of Chapter 3, I suggest getting familiar with it before continuing Chapter 4. Machinery is an economic category that supplements the division of labor, as in they neutralize the contradictions of each other. Machinery unites what the division of labor separates. Machinery acts as a great benefit, simplifying work, reducing costs, and as we have stated, acts as a uniting force of labor. Machinery acts as an equalizing force as well, allowing more equal access to labor's product with varying abilities and the specialization of workers. Machinery also presents a number of vices as part of the system of economic contradictions. Capitalism. For one, a certain number of laborers are cut from production with every innovation. Proudhon even takes it further, showing how capitalists eventually look to totally eliminate the need for laborers in production, inadvertently killing themselves, especially when we take into account overproduction, which the machines enable. For no one can buy their products if wealth does not circulate to the broader economy. Furthermore, Proudhon is going to reference the terrible conditions most associated with industrial capitalism to show how machinery affects the public health and the degenerating intellect of the workers, illustrating how the effects of developing industry within capitalism degrade the working class. He therefore makes a call for machinery to be used by all instead of being used in hierarchical industry serving the needs of a minority, to be exploited in common by all. Proudhon still teases us, stating that the solution is found in more analysis. You guys have any general thoughts so far?
This chapter, I admit I didn't have as much time to digest and kind of reflect on it and then reread some of it this time, just because of how busy the last week has been for me.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm not going to be able to contribute as much this time as I normally would, but I did highlight some interesting quotes that we can talk about. But I'll let you guys kind of start. That might help me kind of start to get the juices flowing.
Okay. Um, the big thing is that it's gonna. This chapter, I think, supplements the last chapter really well because Proudhon didn't really talk about the synthesis so much because in this chapter, he's saying that machinery is going to complement or neutralize the contradictions in the division of labor, which I thought was really cool because he goes on a lot to talk about education. And I think we talked about this last time with Mr. Gary that that parallels a lot of what not Stephen, Josiah Warren, his Proudhon mirrors a lot of Josiah Warren's thoughts on education with the hands-on approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Robert K. Merton, sociologist, he talks about how a lot of times there's repeated discoveries that occur simultaneously, and it's typically a sign of the times. Like I believe the telescope, there was like three different people who claimed to invent it like the same year. It
Yeah,
reminds me of Proudhon and Josiah Warren. They're both coming to very
Mm.
similar conclusions, but with no interaction between the two groups. It's kind
yeah.
of
I
interesting.
think didn't Newton and was it Leibniz?
Yeah, but people say Leibniz copied Newton.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
okay.
Newton and Leibniz.
Yeah, he plagiarized him.
Um,
I heard that Leibniz did it independently, but if
damn,
people say I'd take somebody else's word for it, but
plagiarize
I'm not sure.
Leibniz, or based on I thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be like a tendency kind of thing, because if you look at like for example, when it comes to the law, like Bastiat and Spooner came to very similar conclusions, even though they probably didn't exchange any words.
Mm-hmm.
So it probably is like a product of the time.
Yeah.
What's even more is the development of capitalism industrially in France is going to be way different to that in America because this is the 1840s that you've written this, so a substantial portion of America are still self-employed peasants basically. So even though the conditions are going to be vastly different between the two nations, they're still coming to the same conclusions essentially, or similar
Yeah.
conclusions.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good point. Yeah, America was kind of behind in terms of industrialization, but yeah, it came to similar conclusions somehow. Just tying it into past readings, just saying it says second period machinery. So going back, he says that society first creates the concept of value, right, and then it gives birth once they have the concept of value, it gives birth to the division of labor. And for him, those are antagonistic categories. Like value, I think, is kind of unitary, and the division of labor is kind of like dispersed. And then now he puts division of labor and machinery as antagonisms. And I think it's kind of like going back to it's like a centralizing, whereas division of labor is more dispersed. Machinery is getting that division of labor into the same. He wanted to be equating machinery with workshop later on.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
Oh, yeah, which I found
Mhm.
that section rather interesting because he equates machinery to the workshop, and then talks about the hierarchical structure of the workshop, and kind of has a little bit of a some things to say about that I found pretty interesting. We can get to later.
Interesting.
I don't know. Did you guys notice his discussion on what liberty is in this?
a little bit, yeah. Very Hegelian.
Yeah,
That.
which is really
I'm sorry.
complicated. So
Yeah.
Right, complicated.
Dialectics in motion.
Right. See, that's when I think of Hegel, I think like there's like two poles within the mind that it's going back and forth. I think it's liberty and equality or something. It's like in the beginning you have both in a way. It's like a negative liberty and a negative equality, and then over time you start moving towards this pole, and people are like, well, we need to go back towards the other pole, and you get this kind of back and forth process. But while you're doing it, it's kind of refining itself a little bit. Like there's something being learned from one point to the next, if that makes sense. So what he's saying is that there's a kind of liberty that was there in the beginning, but now we've kind of turned it into this kind of like a positive liberty variant somehow. That's kind of how Hegel kind of views development in general. Like it's an imminent process going on.
yeah, he's saying.
Excuse
me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, with the. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say that between the whole dialectical process and the like, it seems that for every a pass of one pole into the other, or each part of the pole kind of rubs off onto the other until they'll both come into that synthesis where both come to a sort of, at least not if not a unity, at least a kind of plurality where both can act well in tandem and complement each other towards more positive ends.
Like neutralize each other.
Do you? What do you do when you guys say like negative and positive? Are you referring to like a moral thing? Like what do you mean by that?
Like I think his negative, kind of like negative liberty and positive liberty. Do you know those kind of terms?
Yeah. So like positive liberty being
The freedom to be
capability
able to
do
act.
some,
Yeah,
capability versus freedom from.
it's like that.
No, okay. Just wanted to make sure because I wasn't sure whether it was this or something else.
Yeah. One passage caught my eye. It's I highlighted it here. Instead of considering liberty as a dogma, I shall present it as a result. Instead of making it an attribute of man, I shall make it the attribute of civilization. Instead of imagining forms of government calculated to establish it, I shall do my best to explain how it is born of every step of our progress. I think this ties in well because he treats liberty as kind of like, you kind of have it, but it's defined by like the impressions you get. He says that a little bit later.
Yeah, that was he was quoting somebody right there, wasn't he? He was quoting Dunoyer. I don't know. My French sucks.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I'm trying to find where that quote was in the PDF I've got open.
Yeah. Monsieur Dunoyer.
Oh, Dunoyer. Right before that, I'll read a small paragraph. He says, I say then that liberty, like intelligence, is naturally an undetermined, unformed faculty, which gets its value and character later from external impressions. A faculty, therefore, which is negative at the beginning, but which gradually defines and outlines itself by exercise. I mean by education. So yeah, there's we were kind of already saying this, like a self-education at play.
Yeah, liberty is more than just the not people not messing with you. It's having the capacity to exercise your faculties and to do stuff.
Yeah, I think
Develop
made-
yourself as a person.
Yeah, it's the ability to actually do what you want and pursue it instead of having a roadblock in the way.
Which, for all the stuff about Marx having transcended Proudhon, it reminds me a lot of Marx's whole thing about, like, in a communist society, you can develop, a man will be able to fully develop his faculties, and in the morning you can be one type of worker, then at night you can be a fisherman or whatever. I don't remember the full quote, but it's like an often quoted Marx
Yeah,
passage.
it's you can fish in the morning, you can rear cattle in the evening, and criticize after dinner. That's what I
Yeah,
remember of it.
yeah, there seems to be a sort of that sort of thing going on here for Proudhon, when the way he understands liberty as being like the like, it's more than just, like I said, more than just, like, not having the government get in the way of you doing things. It's actually having the opportunity to, you know live your life the way you want, do the types of things you want to do, and develop your intelligence, you know develop yourself, which I think is pretty in line
Mhm.
with, like, most
Yeah,
the
exactly.
the more leftist conceptions of liberty tend to have that sort of positive aspect, which is one of our big breaks with, I would say, right libertarians who see liberty as more of a purely negative thing.
I don't know how you guys feel, but I've always thought of like negative liberty as kind of like a bastion of how positive liberty develops, essentially.
I tend to think of them as being kind of a false dichotomy. I need to develop that more before I really talk about it at length. I don't necessarily buy the distinction.
I have a feeling Proudhon's going to talk about that more throughout this book.
Yeah.
But yeah. I have a question. Earlier we were talking about Malthus. Was that in reference to this chapter?
I'd actually forgotten until I quickly looked over it that he'd mentioned Malthus at one point.
Yeah.
That came up just because it was on my mind from the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Malthus thing just came up just for its own sake, it seemed.
Yeah, Proudhon's got a piece on, I think it's just called the Malthusians or something like that. He basically just accuses the Malthusians of being, just making excuses for the current system, like, just, which is, pretty much true.
Yeah. Proudhon talks about his method, which I think is interesting. I have a feeling
By the way,
I haven't read.
Go ahead. Sorry. I was just
Bert-
gonna say
Okay, go.
that I had just found out that you were Pluto. I thought you were somebody new.
Oh.
Sorry, go on.
He talks about his method, which is like the succession of economic categories as ideas. He talks a lot about ideas in this chapter, which I think is pretty interesting. And I assume Berthier is going to pull from that a lot in his article.
Which article?
It was the one about the method of Proudhon versus Marx, I think it
Oh.
was.
Right.
Let me try to find something. It's about
Yeah, that whole article is about how he's comparing this book to Capital mainly, and he's showing that Proudhon's argument was showing how the collective reason, which is a concept he came up with, how it unfolds in society, how kind of group ideas are at play. And Marx took that and was like, it's a bunch of idealists, nothing. You can't start without history, you can't start with abstract categories, yada, yada, yada. And then in Capital, he does the same thing as Proudhon. That's what Berthier talks a lot about, is how in the beginning he's doing this historical method, Marx, you have to go through history in order to understand the ways that bourgeois property forms and stuff like that. But then when he gets to Capital, he kind of he doesn't write anything on political economy for 10 years. And then when he does, he kind of abandons the historical method. And Capital starts the exact same way as this book, which is just starts with commodities, and then he breaks it into value, use value, and exchange value, and then into division of labor.
Proudhon here,
Just-
he I
It
thought it was-
always
go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, like, it always originally when I had started trying to understand Marx and Hegel, it always seemed weird to me how they never justify they always justified the actions of the proletariat with historical materialism. When it came to the bourgeois class, they saw them as guilty and they didn't justify their actions with materialism. But then eventually, I kind of understood that Marx actually saw capitalism as a more of a religion that was imposed by the bourgeois class to oppress the proletarian, and then that kind of like helped me see what he was saying kind of like make sense. Even though Marx didn't really care about making sense because he just didn't care about contradictions, but it just kind of helped me understand him.
Really quick on that. In his earlier works, even in like up to the manifesto, he's saying that like exploitation's out in the open for everybody to see. I think he says like it's naked, it's right in your face. Like there's no denying that it's occurring. Whereas in feudalism, it was religion, it was kind of veiled, it was harder to see. But then he starts to move off that view in his later works. So starting with what is that, a contribution and a critique of political economy, he brings out like the classic definition. Where was I going?
A definition of what?
We start talking more about ideology. Is it that kind of ideology kind of hides like
Right. Yeah.
exploitation
Sorry.
is more
I lost my train
hidden
of
than
thought for a second. But yeah, it's much more. Even the bourgeois are don't even see it anymore. It's nobody kind of sees it. It's this. What's going on in capital is it's this inner logic. Like on the outside, it appears that you're signing a contract for a wage and stuff like that. But on the inner, the unseen realm, there's so much going on where exploitation is taking place. So in his early works, it's very like out in the open and everybody can see it. But then in his later works, he's saying, well, it kind of is more like a religion, and the fact that everybody is buying into this system and you can't really see what's occurring anymore. I don't know. Robbing the states.
Do you think
that?
you think that might have to do with like the fact that like he might have started like, well, this is obvious, and then he started debating people. People are like, no, it's not, and it was like, all right, let me just change it to like it's hidden and people just don't get it.
Kind of, more or less. I think he realized it was much more complex than what it was at
Then he
first
thought it
sight.
was.
I remember Wilbur saying somewhere that around Proudhon's time, people were kind of catching on to the fact that the workers were cheated and like there's wealth accumulating to like one class of people. They just they didn't pin it down on what it was yet. So we have varying theories of like exploitation that's gonna simultaneously crop up. So I think it probably is a little bit of both, like most things. Like people are catching on, but it's not like in your face.
Right. Well, that's what Proudhon is saying. He's saying Proudhon's actually pointing to something and saying all these monopolies, all these things upheld by the state power, is kind of what's occurring. So it is in view, but at the same time, it's not in view. It's just like you're saying, it's an in between. Kind of, it is obvious, and at the same time, it's not obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what caught my eye
It's
is
transparent. It's transparent enough to where you see through it, but you kind of see outlines of it. Is what I'd probably describe it as.
yeah. Well, you can see kind of like the effects, but not like what's actually like going on in the background, right?
Yeah, exactly. You see the effects, but you don't see the actual process of the things occurring. Like you don't actually get into the process of making capital, but you do see the effects that capital has upon the world.
I'm curious, Gary or Croker, if you caught Proudhon talking about facts and like real ideas, essentially. He's saying that use value and exchange value are not real value. No, they're not real, but his synthetic value is real.
Yeah, they
Do you see that?
they're the contradiction. They're contradictory. They're the antinomy that he has to sort of try to
Yeah, he's saying
look at, and then the synthesis. The synthesis is what makes them what. Well, sorry. The synthesis is real and is made real through the contradiction of these two, like, kind of opposing principles, like these two, like, opposing contradictory.
I guess
I suppose I shouldn't say
Yeah, yeah,
forces
yeah.
because that implies that they're real, but
he says they're illegitimate and non-conclusive. That creates like the legitimate what was it, constitution,
constituted value.
yeah, constituted value. um
I did see that. I made a mental note to kind of chew on that a bit more later, so I'm glad you brought it up.
yeah,
Let me see if I can find where he talks about that real quick.
he also says like facts are not matter but visible facts are not matter but visible manifestations in visible ideas. They're like, yeah, this is kind of like the idea realist approach, probably, as opposed to the strict materialist one, which I think Labadie makes a note of. He criticizes
he's
Marx
right.
for being materialist too much.
Labadie. I've never heard anybody say his name out loud.
Labadie.
I pronounce it in my head as Labadie because it looks kind of French, and that's just kind of
Yeah.
my very superficial knowledge of French makes me want to say it that way in my head.
Who knows?
I pronounce it Labrador.
I just like to call him Laddie.
Guess we should talk about machinery sometime soon.
All right, machinery. I have a paragraph I could read.
Okay.
Machinery.
Machinery.
Perhaps a fragment of it.
Go nuts.
From the very fact that
The
machinery
story goes like
diminishes
this.
Oh,
the workman's toil. Let me read it again.
yeah, go ahead.
Come on, Chaos Man. No, I'm just messing.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Chaos Mixer Man. I like that name. Okay. From the very fact that machinery diminishes the workman's toil, it abridges and diminishes labor, the supply of which thus grows greater from day to day and the demand less. Little by little, it is true, the reduction in prices causes an increase in consumption. The proportion is restored and the laborers set at work again. But as industrial improvements steadily succeed each other and continually tend to substitute mechanical operation for the labor of man, it follows that there is a constant tendency to cut off a portion of the service and consequently to eliminate laborers from production. Now, it is with the economic order as with the spiritual order. Outside of the church, there is no salvation. Outside of labor, there is no subsistence. Society and nature equally...
Sorry.
Yeah, subsistence. Damn it. Society and nature equally pitiless are in accord in the execution of this new decree. End quote.
There needs to be a lot more quotation marks in this, and my copy at least, because I can't tell which things are and are not a quote.
Yeah, it's sometimes confusing. You have to really pay attention to the colons when they come up, because there's a couple of things that I thought Proudhon was saying that I had to go back and be like, wait a second, that doesn't really seem like Proudhon's saying that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh wait, yes, that was a quote.
Yeah.
There were sections of this chapter that felt a little bit off topic. Proudhon sometimes does that. He's a little bit rambly at times. I enjoy it, but like I think this one I just kind of noticed it more, and it made it a little bit. I had to kind of pay more attention than usual to try to make sure I was actually, noting the things that were more on topic, I suppose.
He's a rambler.
Professional
see, there was a
ramblers.
quote from this.
He's a rambling man.
Exactly.
A rambling man.
Here's another quote. If you want me to keep reading, it's related.
Sure.
All right. Political economy, that is proprietary despotism, can never be in the wrong. It must be the proletariat. The example of printing has been cited many a time, always to sustain the optimistic view. The number of persons supported today by the manufacture of books is perhaps 1,000 times larger than it was that of the copyists and illuminators prior to Gutenberg's time. And then going down a little bit. Once more, no one denies that machines have contributed to the general welfare. But I affirm, in regard to this incontestable fact, that the economists fall short of the truth when they advance the absolute statement that the simplification of processes has nowhere resulted in a diminution of the number of hands employed in any industry whatever. What the economists ought to say is that machinery, like the division of labor in the present system of social economy, is at once a source of wealth and a permanent and fatal cause of misery. So yeah, he's just showing that there's an antimony, there's an antagonism within everything. Every category has a good side and a bad side.
And this is, I think I mentioned to Robin the State, or I thought of mentioning to Robin the State, that Proudhon has kind of like a different way of thinking about problems and thinking about capitalism than like the classical liberals, for instance, did. And he's looking at tensions and contradictory like tendencies within the system and the way they interact to create problems, and the way that you can try to find a balance to the various tendencies that he wants to try to pull out and say, well, what can we do with this? How can we make this? How can we make this just and not have the result of extreme poverty or robbing people of liberty and stuff? So when we're talking about contradictions here, that's something to pay attention to, because it's going to inform the way he thinks about things like rights and society in general.
Society.
Get
Okay.
a load of this society.
Oh,
Society.
You live in one.
a little bit.
But
We live in a society.
Labadie has an excellent
Before
quote I'm
you
going to
get
share later.
head into it. Yeah,
It's related to society, but yeah, we could talk about.
society.
If you guys don't mind,
yeah,
some,
To bro,
like if you guys have like a reference or something of like a mutualist debating a statist or any other kind of person. I've only seen mutualists debating ANCAPs, so I would like to see other debates.
As a tangent, ThoughtBat is gonna debate Econoboy, which I have no idea how that's gonna turn out. It could go great or it could be horrible, but I don't know.
If ThoughtBat wants
That's
to,
gonna be interesting.
if ThoughtBat wants to do like some prep with
that's
us,
fun.
that might be a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the big leagues. I mean,
Yeah.
Econoboy
I'll,
has like a
I'll
degree in economics.
yeah, it's gonna be rough for him if he tries to stay only on economics. I think and if I'm deviating too much from the topic, you guys can let me know. Because I was going to debate Econoboy a while ago, but I just don't want to debate people right now. I got some personal stuff going on.
Okay.
And I've come to realize that Econoboy's weakness is morality. So if ThoughtBat stays within the area of ethics, I think he can crush him very harshly. Like stay in ethics and sprinkle in some economics, he could crush him.
Maybe.
I've heard there's a lot of debates on TikTok.
Who has followers on TikTok?
I heard there's debates. What's his name? Skep. He's always showing debate footage on TikTok.
Yeah, I sometimes check his TikTok.
They do debate on there. I'm like half joking, but half serious. I mean, I don't know how great the debates are, but they are debating.
To answer your question, or at least respond to something you said, Robin the State, you said that you don't see mutualists arguing with like statists or anything that much. I've argued, and I've seen other mutualists argue with tankies a lot, Marxist-Leninists, and just other types of Marxists as well.
No, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying I haven't seen it, and I know I'm assuming it probably does. But a lot of what YouTube recommends me, it's like already like libertarian stuff. So
Oh yeah.
I'm not surprised it hasn't like recommended it to me. I'm
I'm
just
not
saying
sure
like
that
if you guys,
there's a lot of. Well, I meant I thought you meant just like kind of in general. I haven't
Mhm.
seen a lot of mutualists engage in debates on YouTube, and I think where we're at right
Me either.
now, it's probably I don't know if it's a good idea, just because
I don't think it is at
what
all.
what we're doing in this Discord, the reason it exists, like kind of the impetus I had for trying
Hmm.
to get it going was
Hmm.
mutualists kind of need to get our shit figured out a little bit better, and get on the same page about this stuff, because when you look at the representation of mutualism on places like YouTube or God forbid Wikipedia, just like the stuff that's most readily available to people who are out there kind of looking for ideologies or trying to learn about more stuff, a lot of it is really inconsistent and a lot of it's very superficial. And what we're
Yeah.
trying to do, especially with our reading of stuff like System of Economic Contradictions, is get a little bit more systematic and get a little bit more on the same page, get a little bit more in
Hmm.
depth, so that when we're ready, we'll be able to engage in those types of high profile debates from a place of like
Yeah.
well informed, uh, you know, well,
Yeah.
just from a place that is well informed.
I mean, yeah, like when I was invited to the server, it was by the guy I actually blocked already.
Yep. Yeah.
Wait, okay.
Good
He invited
character.
me because I'm actually like interested in learning about mutualism. Like I'm not like I've stated it before. Like even though I'll occasionally engage in debate with you guys, I'm not really like interested in that. Like my goal here is not to debate people, is more to see what you guys, the way you guys think, what is it that you guys want, that kind of things. Um, so I do like that you guys are kind of like, kind of like regrouping and like being like, okay, what are we doing? We're getting crushed because as much as as much as it might seem like you and me and you guys have like a lot of disagreements, I would say like the disagreements that I have with you guys are very minor compared to the disagreements that I have with the common public. So I like a win for you guys, it's a win for me in my eyes.
Mm.
So I'm excited to see you guys get better and crush out there. So maybe your ideas
Yes.
become more widely acceptable.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Well,
anyway, this
but
is kind of turning into more of just like an
yeah, to
impromptu.
bring it back to the topic.
Yeah, I was gonna say this is turning into like an impromptu just discussion, voice chat instead of
Now let's tie it back to machinery.
yeah. Well, yeah. Let's
yeah,
tie
yeah,
this back to
Yeah,
machinery
yeah.
somehow.
yeah. I was gonna comment on that actually.
The Machinery of Freedom by David
Yeah,
Friedman
I
is an
went
ANCAP book. Speaking of machinery,
True.
So
Speaking of,
most ANCAPs actually don't consider David
yeah,
Freeman to be an ANCAP.
you don't.
I don't consider myself an ANCAP anymore. Kind
Oh,
of
okay. I
like
didn't know that.
getting away from the term. I don't see it as productive. So but yeah, most ANCAPs don't consider David Freeman an ANCAP though.
Interesting. When I was an ANCAP, he was fairly well regarded. I
okay,
mean,
anyway.
he was a little bit of a he was a little bit out there because he wasn't an Austrian. But anyway, yeah. Back to the topic. I had a quote
Yeah, cool.
that I have highlighted in front of me that I
Yeah,
wanted to read.
um,
Um,
did you want to go, or do we talk about Malthus and the excessive fecundity of marriage?
we can cover that real quick if you want.
Yeah. 2 centuries ago, Gary
yeah.
talked about a
Let's go
quote
over Malthus and marriage.
about the religion of political economy, and essentially it's like the faults of the system are essentially blamed on the workers instead of like actual systemic failures. So it's talking about um when the machinery I mean, when less people are needed for workers because of the advances in machinery, there we then blame overpopulation on like the workers for the faults of the system rather than like the actual illogical results that from the privileges of capital, basically.
Yeah, there was a really good
Immigrant.
quote that I'm looking
Yeah,
for.
and
Oh yeah, there it is.
to go off little bit of that.
He says he lists a bunch of statistics about savings and
Yeah.
how a lot of the working class doesn't put money into savings banks. He says all these facts are entirely true, and the inference to be drawn from them in favor of machines is of the exactest, namely that they have indeed given a powerful impetus to the general welfare. But the facts with which we shall supplement them are no less authentic, and the inference to be drawn from these against machines will be no less accurate. To wit, that they are a continual cause of pauperism. I appeal to the figures of Monsieur Fix himself. Well pronounced piece, but I like the idea that there was a guy who's an economist named Mr. Fix. Um, out of 320,000 workmen and 80,000 house servants residing in Paris, there are 230 of the former and 46,000 of the latter, a total of 276,000 who do not deposit in the savings banks. No one would dare pretend that these are 276,000 spendthrifts and ne'er-do-wells who expose themselves to misery voluntarily. Now, as among the very ones who make the savings, there are to be found poor and inferior persons for whom the savings bank is but a respite from debauchery and misery, we may conclude that, out of all the individuals living by their labor, nearly three-fourths either are imprudent, lazy, and depraved, since they do not deposit in the savings bank, or are too poor to lay up anything. There is no alternative, but common sense, to say nothing of charity, permits no wholesale accusation of the laboring class. It is necessary, therefore, to throw the blame back upon our economic system. How is it that Mr. Fix did not see that his figures accuse themselves? I really like that because that is super relevant just for general debates about systemic poverty and systemic, like even stuff like systemic racism. Like to this day, I get conservatives telling me like, well, if black people are disproportionately poor, it's just because they needed to make better choices. It's a cultural thing in the black community that they're just not good at saving money and stuff like that. It's like,
True.
guys, like the numbers, just like you really think that like such a high number of people are all just lazy or imprudent? Like
Yeah.
come on, like and so I really like that the way he put that. He said, how is it that his numbers how is it he didn't see that his figures accused themselves?
Yeah, it's pretty characteristic of Proudhon. He's looking at their arguments and turning it against themselves.
Yeah.
That's basically what his property as
Chad.
well.
Yeah. Imminent critique, it's fucking powerful.
True.
And then later on he says something. He says the progress of poverty then has been more rapid than that of population. In face of this fact, what becomes of the hypotheses of Malthus? And yet it is indisputable that during the same period the average comfort increased. What then do statistics signify? But it's cool that he brings up, like, you know, if you look at the the rise in population and the rise in poverty, like poverty's getting worse, disproportionate to the growth of population. So fuck off, Malthus. It's not just population that causes poverty.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to go off of that a little bit, I can't help but think of it when Proudhon was talking about machinery that he seems to recognize that, well, despite what common folk and what's usually put there is that technology is by no means some neutral force, and, well, the bourgeois are well capable of appropriating it in a manner that does keep well to themselves, despite where disruption may arise. And,
Yeah,
well, if the issue of poverty is the issue of a systemic exploitation and of any proletariat, lumpen or otherwise, or peasant, and to make sure that the wealth maintained not only he actually keeps the wheels greased, but it actually keeps the figurative machine of the state to be up to date and up to quality. And their issue with shit like technological employment and is, well, it's kind of like what I'd say, it's a systemic issue that no individual sort of action and change can excuse me. Yeah, no actual individual change of lifestyle can and change the fact that you're her job is automated away, and you have to reskill and respecialize into something all new, or else you're basically fucked. That's what I see of it anyway.
Yeah, I like the way you put that technology isn't neutral, and you have to contextualize technology in social organization, which brings me to the quote I wanted to read next, which is, but it is necessary to penetrate still farther into the antinomy. Machines promised us an increase of wealth. They have kept their word, but at the same time endowing us with an increase of poverty. They promised us liberty. I'm going to prove that they have brought us slavery. I have stated that the determination of value and with it the tribulations of society began with a division of industries without which there would be no exchange or wealth or progress. The period through which we are now passing, that of machinery, is distinguished by a special characteristic: wages. Wages issued in a direct line from the employment of machinery, that is, to give my thought the entire generality of expression which it calls for, from the economic fiction by which capital becomes an agent of production. Wages, in short, coming after the division of labor and exchange, is the necessary correlative of the theory of the reduction of costs, in whatever way this reduction may be accomplished. This genealogy is too interesting to be passed by without a few words of explanation. So then he goes on to explain what he means more by that. I think reading all of it would be too much to try to read right now, but
Yeah.
I like that. Like I said, the contextualization of technology
Mhm.
within the social organization, like so like the neutrality of technology is kind of a fiction when you have an organization that benefits people who get to own, get special rights over the technology that give them advantages over people who don't own the technology. It's essentially like, the whole thing with like, I was going to mention this, the whole thing where Marxists say that like Proudhon didn't have a critique of like exploitation, like didn't have a good theory of exploitation or a good like class theory, like fuck off. Like this whole thing is about how social organization under capitalism fucks over workers at just like the level, if you want to use Marxist terminology, the relations of production. That's what Proudhon's talking about.
Yeah. I don't remember if we talked about this quote earlier, but he basically sums up all the kind of abuses of machinery, um, the ruinous influence of machinery on social economy, and the conditions of the laborer is exercised in 1,000 ways, all of which are bound together and reciprocally labeled: cessation of labor, reduction of wages, overproduction, obstruction of the market, alteration and adulteration of products, failures, displacement of laborers, degeneration of the race, and finally disease and death. Which I think that summarizes kind of like his criticisms best.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I like
yeah,
to.
it's
This
actually
is
interesting that you bring that up. So it kind of makes me think of Heidegger when he ever or talks about tech, like the essence of technology is by no means technological. All it shapes us as much as we shape it. So, the negative results of it is as much of our own nature as as much of a machine's. I, I think there is one in there that yeah, there's one quote from Heidegger that I feel reminds me close of what you just mentioned there, Tech. I'm gonna try to find it, see if I can find it anyway.
okay. I'll let somebody else do some of the quoting or talking for a while after this.
Gary,
But I
I think
also really like.
Gary should say something.
Yeah, you're right.
I was going to read a quote.
Read a quote.
Gary, speak.
We're reading lots of quotes.
Let Proudhon
The
speak
mach-
for himself.
Yeah, exactly. He says, the machine or the workshop,
Do a seance for Proudhon.
after having degraded the laborer by giving him a master, completes his degeneracy by reducing him from the rank of an artisan to that of a common workman.
Oh, I saw that. It was an awesome quote.
Yeah, I actually have that. I have that highlighted as well.
Yeah.
I beat you to
Uh,
it.
Yeah, a few, like a page down from that. He closes out that section of the chapter out with a few pretty cool lines. He says, "With machinery in the workshop, divine right, that is the principle of authority." Underline that if you have a physical copy. Makes its entrance into political economy. Capital, mastership, privilege, monopoly, loaning, credit, property, etc., Such are, in economic language, the various names of I know not what, but which is otherwise called power, authority, sovereignty, written law, revelation, religion, God, in short, cause and principle of all our miseries and all our crimes, and who, the more we try to define him, the more eludes us. It is then impossible that, in the present condition of society, the workshop with its hierarchical organization and machinery, instead of serving exclusively the interests of the least numerous, the least industrious, and the wealthiest class, should be employed for the benefit of all. I think that is a really succinct
Like you
summary,
of not just the chapter, but like an overview of the whole book, basically.
and
Mhm.
yeah, yes, and even in a big way, Proudhon's thought, because he highlights, he says it outright, the principle of authority, and makes an explicit connection between divine right and the principle of authority, and then capital, mastership, privilege, monopoly, owning, credit, property, etc. So like, it's very clear right there that for Proudhon, his critique of governmentalism, his critique of governments and authority, it's the same critique as his critique of capitalism, which is something Sean has really stressed in his work, because it's very important that, like, a lot of anarchists, like, they'll critique the state and they'll critique capitalism, but they'll often borrow like Marx's critique of capitalism and then have like a separate critique of the state that doesn't use Marx, and or kind of like uses the modified Marx. But like for Proudhon, we've already got that. We've got a unified theory that like kind of covers all that really well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like Marx is very like epoch oriented. Like he's like, for this epoch is this, for this epoch is that. For Proudhon, he's saying there's something with authority that stretches back, likely to like the dawn of civilization. You know, there's something that's going beyond just these epochs or whatever. That there's some kind of reason that authority keeps popping up everywhere. And yeah, so the like you were saying, this is the first place where exploitation and authority kind of enter into the analysis. So before he had value, then he had the division of labor, and then it's machinery when you start grouping together individuals into labor, that you
Yeah,
start to get, yeah, you start to get groups working together, and then you also get this kind of master underling phenomenon
yeah,
that occurs all over the place.
yeah. It's and specifically he says the workshop with its hierarchical organization and machinery, instead of serving exclusively the interest of the least numerous. Yeah. So like, I didn't read the first part of that, so it didn't make a lot of sense. My bad. But I'm just kind of like going back to the workshop with its hierarchical organization. Like that's like, it's really cool to see him talking about that so explicitly. Um, and honestly, like, anytime you see like fucking Springtime of Nations trying to claim that Proudhon was not, was like an ANCAP or something like that, like throw that quote
Hey,
at them.
he doesn't explicitly say it.
China.
Yeah, better retract your statement.
Oh, hey, I managed to find that Heidegger quote out as mean to, if I could say, hey, real quick.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm actually going to be reading two quotes. It's the one where he actually defines technology, and then the one that I meant to. Technology is a mode of revealing. Technology comes to a presence in the realm where revealing and unconcealment take place, where Aletheia, truth, happens. And the other one is who accomplishes the challenging setting upon through which what we call the real is revealed as standing reserve, where he's obviously man. To what extent is man capable of such a revealing? Man can indeed conceive, fashion, and carry through this or that in one way or another, but man does not have control over unconcealment itself, in which at any given time the real shows itself or withdraws. The fact that the real has been showing itself to the light of ideas ever since the time of Plato. Plato did not bring about. The thinker only responded to what addressed itself to him. now to try and translate all that. What Heidegger is going on about is that it's technology, when you get to the root of it, technically is revealing. So, oh, you see, he's with like he doesn't actually. He is anti-technology, despite like some conceptions of it or other. He more is against how modern technology is taken to with the like when he brings up the standing and reserve that he's more criticizing this scientist thinking and that technology brings about out where it reduces is all from like trees and rivers and mountains into like to just stock standing reserves of resources to be exploited later on, which he finds to be to be quite disagreeable since it does go against his own environmentalism. And so, yeah.
Yeah, Heidegger is generally considered to be more of like a romantic, right, with his view of technology and stuff. Like a little bit more like he was like a fascist, wasn't he? He was like a member of the Nazi Party or something. So like he was a bit more
Yeah, like
backwards.
he was a member of the Nazi Party for a moment.
Yeah, but
When
wasn't he
I
sort of like
hear of the
what
and I looked into it a little bit, and it seemed like he was getting kind of up within the fur of the times, kind of pun it that the whole nationalism ill craze seemed to have come up with it, and when he later went or broke away from the Nazi Party, he seemed to have never or actually brought on into it again, and the actual whole intersection, as it were, between Heidegger's politics and his philosophy is something that I look a bit more into. Since I kind of like Heidegger,
my
and
my general impression from
there may be some stuff in there.
my general impression from secondary sources I've seen is that nobody seems to really agree with how much his politics and his philosophy informed each other. But my point was more just like he had sort of a backwards, like sort of romantic view when it came to technology. Where I think with Proudhon,
Yeah,
he wants to look forward. Like he's not saying he's not taking like a Luddite view or like a primitivist view. He's specifically talking about the way that machinery works in the given system.
Yeah.
It's sort of rigged against the workers, and what needs to happen is that there needs to be a transformation of the social organization that away from the principle of authority, and of course later this is the book where he says like he introduces mutualism as a term. So like later on he's going to say that it needs to be based on the principles of mutualism, reciprocity, and all that. So
Yeah,
um,
he says in a quote about the benefits of machinery, it's like our machinery is kind of like a sign of human liberty because we have control over nature essentially, which is probably going to conflict with a lot of Anne Prim or Luddite or whatever theory.
yeah, I think I haven't read all of Wealth of Nations. I've read chunks of it. I think there's a point where Adam Smith critiques extreme examples of the division of labor, extreme specialization. He says that it basically causes like idiocy and like
Yeah.
lack of development of skills, which is Proudhon's echoing that here.
Mhm.
And I think if I remember right, Adam Smith's solution to that was like education, was like having like government programs for education for so people can still have like still learn about like high-minded stuff and still engage their minds and engage with the arts, with the liberal arts and stuff like that, which Proudhon specifically talks about liberal arts versus servile arts um, in this chapter. So I wondered if some of Proudhon's talking about education and talking about developing people's engagement with the
Mm-hmm.
liberal arts was kind of influenced by Smith. I think I think of course he's gonna take a different approach to that. It's not gonna be like the government should have these programs teach us. He's instead saying like, we just need to completely like overhaul the way we organize production.
Yeah, because Prudence could be more favor of like applied education or like hands-on education, like actually engaging with what you're
Yeah,
learning about.
yeah. But I did make the connection there. I don't know if anybody else did.
I've heard Alex Argana, I think his name is. He essentially talked about this on Twitter, and like a lot of people overlook. Adam Smith pointed out a lot of negatives about the division of labor. That a lot
I
of
was actually just talking with my girlfriend about that last night because she's a history teacher and she knows a lot about this sort of stuff, but she didn't realize that Adam Smith had like critiques of division of labor and of like the landlord class and stuff like that.
yeah, it's kind of amusing to look at that a little embryonic leftism in his in the book.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Okay, there's a reason so many early socialists were influenced by Smith, and it's not because there was nothing there.
yeah, well, I think Carson said classical economics was like a pretty radical doctrine for its time against like the
Yeah.
propertied and privileged classes.
Yeah, like, because it really was like classical liberalism was essentially against privilege and like they weren't pro aristocracy, but the thing was with like Smith is like capitalism was still very much in its infancy, and what his target was mercantilism and like the old aristocracy, the remnants of feudalism and monarchy and stuff. So like,
Hmm.
if Adam Smith had been writing like you know 50 years later, it might have looked a bit different for him. He might have been a little bit more explicitly critical of capitalism.
Maybe. Um, I read a book by John Stuart Mill, the one on socialism. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what he has to say about socialism.
I didn't
He
realize
knew,
until recently that John Stuart Mill had like affinity with socialism.
oh yeah, he knew Saint-Simon. I think he met him. In
Yeah,
passing.
me neither. I thought he was just a regular liberal, but yeah.
Yeah, he's interesting, Mr. Mill. He was in a lot of the circles at the time. He was very. He was someone who was working with the people in mind, if that makes sense. But yeah, he winds up being remembered as a very hardcore liberal. He's kind of similar to Spencer. Like they're remembered kind of similarly, but they're not as. Their reputation does not align that well with their actual views.
Yeah, he seems to have like an affinity of cooperatives
I'll
and stuff like that.
Makes sense.
What was the name of the book you read by Mill?
It's just called Socialism. It's
Oh.
pretty short. It's like 50 pages.
You know what year it came out?
What year it came out? I think it came out in the 1860s, but I don't remember exactly which year.
I don't think he ever read Proudhon.
Oh,
He may
no,
have
he didn't talk about him. He mainly talked about the utopians, like the more explicit utopians, like Saint Simon, Charles Fourier, Robert Owens.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was in those circles.
I want
I
to.
believe he was even in the International, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe just a sympathizer.
Well, he did take inspiration from Josiah Warren, if that means anything.
Oh, really?
Well, it does mean something for sure.
Yeah.
Mill's an interesting character.
I feel like I've said what I've at least touched on what I got most out of this chapter at this point.
I gotta quote.
Okay, yeah.
Sound like you're trying to wrap up. Right?
I was just I wasn't necessarily trying to wrap up. I was trying to
We're
say
going
that
all night.
I feel like if I feel like I pretty much said my piece.
Good. I think
Yeah.
all the listeners are glad to hear that.
Yeah, thank God. He's done. Let's listen to Gray speak for a while.
Yeah. I'll just bug at you. I was gonna say I like his discussion of. Oh, go ahead.
Hello there, viewers out there. Nothing. I was just gonna say, hey, viewers. I see you there. I see you doing that thing. Don't you stop it now. Oh, I see you already, you son of a bitch. Okay, continue.
What were you saying, Gray?
They see you. You don't see them. I
Pretty
was gonna talk about-
confident I may cut this out. You don't know.
True.
Yeah. Really, at the end of the day, even though I am the captain, Hades is the god.
Yeah, pretty much.
Demonic. God. No, I don't know anything about
Jokes
Hades.
on you. I played all the God of War games since they came out. I am the deicide boy. I love me deicide.
Dionysus? Is that what you're talking about?
No, deicide, like
No,
killing a god.
I was saying
Oh.
deicide.
I don't know what DSI is.
You
Yeah.
can't kill a god.
Deicide
It's in the
is killing a
definition.
god. Yeah,
Oh,
it's like homicide, but with a god instead of a person.
How do you kill a god?
I've done that before.
You've done it before?
Oh yeah. You don't know about
Yeah.
my past.
You take a gun and you shoot them in the head. That's how
No,
you
you
kill a
gotta
god.
and stuff. All right, so slavery
It's bad.
is not good. So his point was
Sucks.
it's self-fulfilling. Okay, you probably never heard of this, but there's in experimental sociology, there's identity theory, Stetson Burke. Anyway, what they show, they find it over and over and over, is that when you make a claim to someone, like if I say to the captain, "Oh, you're really girly," he will either
That
do one or the other. He will internalize what I say, like he agrees with it, or he will try to show in the opposite direction that he's not girly. So he'll probably compensate if he feels threatened to show that I'm manly. You know what I mean? So there's one of two things you can do. You can either reject it, which takes a lot of energy to do, or you can internalize it. Once you internalize an identity claim, it kind of becomes self-fulfilling. So in terms of slavery, here's a quote he says. He says, everything in slavery takes on the character of degradation. Habits, tastes, inclinations, sentiments, pleasures. It involves universal subversion. Occupy oneself with the education of the poor. But that would create the most cruel antagonism in these degenerate souls. That would inspire them with ideas which labor would render intolerable to them, affections incompatible with the brutishness of their condition, pleasures of which the perception is dulled in them. If such a project could succeed, instead of making a man of the laborer, it would make a demon of him. So what he's saying is, yeah, that like slaves are slaves in their mind is too. I mean, not all slaves. Some slaves, there's a lot of interesting stories in history of slaves kind of rejecting that they're slaves. Like I remember there was like a prince from Africa who became a slave in America, and he just always would not accept that he was a slave and just acted different than everyone. But once you accept that you are a slave, you kind of you become very subservient, I would imagine, in kind of all kinds of ways. You know, it's like a lifestyle almost. And so and people, you know, like once people stop slavery, it's like these kind of attitudes are still present in society. This kind of like you don't do anything. All right, there's nothing for you to improve. You can't do shit. Okay, like sit home, you know, eat some chips, and that's what you want in
Yes,
life.
something I'm really interested in, just like in my sociological work that I want to do, like throughout my career, is work on like legitimacy, and also work on like complicity in your own oppression. Like why do people obey? Like at what point do people decide not to resist or to like minimize resistance to power? You know, like
That's the $1 million
um,
question.
what's that?
That's the $1 million question: is why
Yeah,
do people consent to their own
yeah,
subordination? Oftentimes,
yeah.
you
Like
know,
the
if
classical
you ever,
liberals were correct to say that
Because
like
they are haunted by the wheels in their head.
um yeah, the classical liberals were like right to say like governments rule by consent of the governed, but they didn't really get into the questions of like why do people consent so much. And Weber, I guess Weber probably wasn't the first to take this up, but like obviously like Marx and Proudhon talked about like what Marx with ideology, Proudhon talking about like governing principles, stuff like that. But you know Yeah, I just that's like a thread I really want to pull on, and I know there's already been a lot of sociological work done with it, but like it's something I'm really interested in, and I think is really important for anarchists. Is like if we're going to try to educate and agitate, we have to understand like you know what we're up against. Like why are people complicit? Like what do we have to say or do that like kind of get people to I hate to use the word wake up or like it sounds like
Right.
Get
we're
enlightened,
like yeah
despookified.
how do we despookify people
Well, with slavery,
Yes, despook them.
particularly in the Caribbean, it was very common for white slave owners to be like, we're completely outnumbered by the slaves here. And like, if they decided to uprise, we'd be screwed. So how do we
in
make
Haiti they
sure?
were completely correct about that as
Then
we
they
saw.
were, and for some reason, oftentimes you get these islands like Haiti and Dominican Republic. What that is, I forgot what the name of it, Hispaniola back then. It's like, yeah, they're completely outnumbered. So why don't the slaves overthrow them? And white people back then would be, well, because they're dumb. That's what they would say, or they would say, oh, they would throw in stuff to kind of make them divided, keep them atomized, and keep them away from each other. But it kind of is going back to what Proudhon said. You kind of internalize that you're a slave, and you start to agree. Yeah, I'm a slave. That's a master. They're. And so when you see the only successful slave revolt in history, Haiti, on the western side of that island, is they were first freed in the French Revolution. The French came and said, okay, you're all free now. And they're like, oh, okay. And then when Napoleon stepped in, he's like, okay, well, we're going to go back on that. You're all back slaves now. And then on on the western part of
I
the
am
island,
sorry, but this is just how it is.
people were pissed. They didn't want to go back. And that's typically what happens. It's typically some macro event occurs. And it makes people kind of wake up for a second and be like, well, I'm not going back into slavery now. It's kind of what you get a
Yeah.
taste of something else.
which is
Oh,
why
There's
and
actually,
it's like to make this go ahead, Hades.
I think it was in this chapter or the last one, Proudhon talks about a bunch of loaders at a wharf, I think in Lyons. Um, Essentially, the local city gives them a monopoly on like loading cargo and whatnot, and then they get used to a certain level of opulence, basically, because their wages are higher than the rest of the workers around the area because they have the local monopoly. Essentially, eventually their monopoly gets taken away, and their wages get lowered again, and then they realize their working conditions sucked, and now they're pretty aggravated against the local political system. Now that they had a taste of kind of like, yeah, they had a taste of good living, and now they can't anymore, which is true because people don't know. People need to know what they don't have to really be frustrated about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Mouse,
Yeah, like you can't miss
Mhm.
what you've never experienced. Yeah.
mouse. Oh, go
I
ahead.
this is why to make this kind of contemporary, like the recent overturning of Roe v. Wade, it's a concern. I'm not going to brush off like how difficult the fight might be, but I what makes me a little bit optimistic is that I think it's going to be hard to take that freedom away without a lot of pushback. Um,
Right.
and
Yeah, it fits in well. And
it,
that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't think that like history is like a continuous progress toward liberty, and like each time we win a freedom, clearly each time we win a freedom we don't get to keep it. And that's one of the main like things that like I think John has tried to stress is like anarchism, like anarchists. There's a demand for vigilance, like this like this ongoing attempt at approximation and being aware of like power dynamics and how progress isn't necessarily linear. It's something we have to keep working on all the time. But yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, go ahead there, Ray.
I was gonna say, there's a sociologist, Sinisa Mausovic. He's Bosnian, I think. His argument is that like anytime rights occur, like we have like the civil rights movement here, and women's suffrage movement, people tend to act like, oh, that was just because they hit the streets and they were working protesting. His argument is actually, if you look at when these occur, it's right after times where they get a taste of something different, like we're talking about. So it's always, it typically involves mobilizing for war. So like for World War I and World War II, all the white men, well, most men go away. And so women start being employed in the regular economy. And then when the men come back, they're like, okay, back to normal. And the women are kind of like, well, they saw what it was like, and they saw that well, before they probably thought, well, I'm not. They come up with reasons of why they can't do it. Well, men are smarter or whatever. Once you get a taste of it, you're kind of like, well, why am I not in the workforce? And then the same thing with civil rights movement. It's like all these black men were enlisted and drafted into the military, particularly World War II, and they're treated as an equal. And then you give back and you're treated not as an equal. And well, that that makes people like furious. And I think that's similar to what you're saying about Roe versus Wade. It's kind of like, well, we've had abortion access here for decades, and now you're taking it away. And yeah, it's not going to go well. I think everybody
Yeah.
can see it's not going to go well.
Yeah, it's hard to people who have gotten a taste of freedom, it's hard to get them to not want it anymore. You have to really wear them down. Or just have like overwhelming power so that they can't really something they can do. Like,
Yeah.
a part of American history that often gets overlooked is what happened to freed slaves in the South immediately after they were freed. Is that they were basically re-enslaved, but in all but name, with like the sharecropping and stuff like that. And like the South found really creative ways to reinstitute slavery by a different name for a long time.
Don't we still have like prison slavery still? Like,
Yeah, like the new Jim Crow, like the whole like the prison system is kind of just a backdoor way to
Yeah, we do.
reinstitute slavery. And
The 13th Amendment didn't close that gap. What a bunch of shit that is.
yeah, the whole like
I still can't believe it.
but
I mean,
actually
I
you
can
can still use
believe it, but still, I just hate it.
yeah you can still use prisoners as slave labor. By the way, it's like oh good, that's not gonna cause problems in the future. Well done, fellas.
this definitely won't be abused.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the prisoners will appreciate the job skills gained, boys.
Mm.
They won't resent you at all.
Anyway, Hades, have you do you have anything to quote? I feel like Gray and I have done most of the talking this time, but I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
I felt like Gary was silent for a lot of it.
No, it was you.
I didn't say I love you. I said you were
I think
silent.
what we're finding out here is that I did most of the talking, and both of you had the perception
I'd
that.
say it's like 33, 33, 33 between everyone.
Oh, I felt like I probably got at least 40%.
Yeah, I have a bunch of quotes. I can.
Yeah,
Zachary was the
hit us
quiet
with
one.
the Hades and connect it to your recent projects on your YouTube channel or something.
I don't have any projects at the moment.
Your recent ones, not your current
Oh.
ones.
God damn, you stole my quotes, Kroger.
There were some really great quotes in this chapter.
I got a
Yeah.
good one.
Okay.
I'll read.
Oh,
Go ahead.
here's one. I guess you're right. This is connected to my last project, but it's talking about large factories. Since the establishment of large factories, a multitude of little industries have disappeared from domestic hearth. So he's talking about machinery is gonna. Okay. During the Industrial Revolution, technology is gonna centralize in these large factory environments. This is what's happening here. But recently, as technology develops, it's individualizing essentially. We're having a new kind of artisan economy with like 3D printing and like local modular productive. I forget what Carson calls them in Exodus, but like cheap means of production for local economies essentially, which I think
I
is
still have
pretty
to read
interesting.
Exodus.
I haven't read all of it. I just read part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I got-
Yeah, but when you bring that up, I remember how, like in India, before that there was any of the factory stuff for like the clothing and textile industry. Apparently in Bengal, they just did like individual looms and weaves that actually produce some of the greatest clothing for silk in the world. And well, when the British came by and restructure or the Indian subcontinent's economy, it just basically destroyed that artisanal craft, and well, it's been lost.
really.
I'm sad that I missed the discussion on the division of labor.
Well, I'm. I guess we can talk about that a little bit. I'm writing a little summary because I don't know if you knew, but last time we had recording issues. So it's gonna be up tonight, I think.
Okay. Cool.
Cool.
All right.
Is there anything else we should go over, or?
I have
I
one
feel
more.
like at
quote.
least for the purposes of the discussion, like the recorded discussion, I feel set. But
Okay. What do you have, Gary?
This is the concluding quote of the chapter. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Now, to solicit the government to take such an initiative to imitate the peasants, who, on seeing the approach of a storm, begin to pray to God and invoke their saint. Governments today, it cannot be too often repeated, are the representatives of divinity. I had almost said executors of celestial vengeance. They can do nothing for us. Does the English government, oh, let me skip this part because it's not contemporary. Aid yourself, and heaven will aid you. This note of popular distrust of divinity tells us also what we must expect of power. Nothing. And then at the end, he says, arrived at the second station of our cavalry, instead of abandoning ourselves to sterile contemplations, let us be more and more attentive to the teachings of destiny. The guarantee of liberty lies in the progress of our torture.
Oh, I
just
think this is a really good quote.
everybody knows what he's referring to as Calvary's capitalized there. Everybody knows what he's referring to there, right? It's more like religious imagery, which he's been doing the whole time.
Right.
What is it?
Calvary's the hill that Jesus was crucified on.
Oh, I'm not religious. I didn't know that. But now the viewers know that. And
Yeah.
also, I think this is a reference to something he builds more upon, and the general idea
Or they know.
is kind of the reactionary tendency of like institutions versus like popular people. I think he does it in this chapter or the last section. He talks about the object of government is always to like maintain order, while the project of like the people that are actually ruled for power is progress, finding new ways to satisfy wants and needs and stuff like that. So these are kind of like contradictory aims, which is built upon in the general idea. But yeah,
Bueno.
is that it?
Yeah. Next time, on the next episode of Mutualists Discuss System of Economic Contradictions, it'll be Chapter 5,
Competition.
third
Next
period.
time on Dragon Ball Z.
And also a review of some famous mutualists now featured on HBO Max is Anarchist Special.
Oh, God.
No.
I have to forget that exists until somebody brings it up. I'm like, fuck. Oh, Jesus Christ.
I watched like most of the second episode
Yeah,
today.
I have to actively clear my mind of that existing, or else I go into a blind rage. Well, not a blind rage, more like a mild rage.
Gary, are you watching it?
I haven't watched it yet. I plan to.
You should watch it. It's a really good show.
It's only coming out one episode at a time.
Yeah, that's how it
Yeah.
happened in the good old days.
Exactly. So I'm waiting for the whole thing to be released, and then I'll sit down.
You're
and
really
watch
gonna.
it.
I don't think you should binge it.
It's such a binge-worthy show after
Yeah.
all.
You're gonna be. It's like an overdose. You can't like do it all in one sitting. You gotta spread it out.
I've been watching a lot of Naked and Afraid XL.
XL.
I'm sparing myself the
You should
eyesore.
just do it all in one
What's
go.
XL about it?
Pirate the whole season and then just blaze through it.
XL's the best one. That's like when there's a big group of naked people out in the middle of the world. With
I
weapons.
refuse to submit myself to the eyesore that is that HBO Max show. I just can't do it.
Biggest
Why do they have to
hunger.
be naked?
I know. It's like, why are they naked? If they get
Why would they
naked?
have to be clothed? Did you think of that, Hades? I thought you were an egoist.
Yeah,
Heck,
true.
it's called Naked and Afraid.
What about clothing optional?
No. has to be
Clothing
naked.
optional and afraid.
No, you must be naked.
I guess that isn't profitable.
True. Yeah, you got to be naked for the views,
For the big bucks.
the big bucks.
For all the crypto.
Really, if clothes didn't exist, would the clothed, unclothed distinction ever be? It wouldn't. Instead, we would just be in our natural forms. As
No,
God or the
nobody,
flying spaghetti a Bosnian man did for us.
nobody wants to be staring at someone's crotch. Okay.
Are you sure about that?
Oh,
Yes, that's nothing interesting. It's just if everybody,
well, that's more your problem with staring at people's crotches, not me.
well, when you got
Well,
it
you-
out, I guess you're right.
Gary is out here spreading the idea that mutualists are prudes.
Yes. No, I mean, as a mutualist, I once went to a nude beach. I was not
Actually, I have a really weird thing about like even having my shirt off in public. To be honest, I'm not like never nude or anything. Just in public specifically, I'm very like shy. I don't think I could ever go to a nude beach.
There's a bunch of old people. That's what I've learned. Who want to take you to the woods to have sex. Not pleasant.
Okay, guys, now tie this back to machinery.
And then-
Bodies are an awful lot like
Yeah.
machines when you think about
Well,
it.
actually,
Let's go back to the question
I have no
concerning
idea why
technology.
I highlighted this. Let me try to find it.
if you do watch Naked and Afraid, okay, and you compare it to the workshop, you see that each person by themselves or with like one other person, I mean, you can't do shit. All you can do is like hopefully start a fire. I mean, but once you got like the division of labor going, and then you can group labor together, it's just like we can do so much. Once we get organized a little bit, it's just like we can hold it down. But when we're not organized, we're really not that great out in nature by ourselves.
True
Suck.
that.
Yeah, we evolved to be social.
They use the techne to reveal what's available to them.
True that.